The piano keys clanged out a crooked rhythm, louder than it needed to be. Like the player was trying to drown out something he couldn't face. The crowd inside the gilded spur was already thick with sweat, tobacco haze, and the copper bite of whiskey. Boots shuffled, cards slapped, and on the makeshift stage under a flickering oil lamp, Clara Avery took her place. She wore red. What else could a girl wear when she wanted to be looked at but not touched? The dress was too tight across her ribs, too low at the neck, and stitched in places she wished it wasn't. But it worked. Men leaned forward, licked dry lips, whispered things they wouldn't dare say out loud if she weren't paid to ignore them. Clara smiled like a snake in heat, slow, practiced, and poison-sweet. But behind her painted lashes, her eyes were searching, always searching. And that's when she saw him. He didn't sit at a table, didn't drink, didn't cheer or even pretend to be amused. Just leaned against the back wall, hat tilted low, face hidden in the shadows, arms folded like he'd seen too much of the world and trusted none of it. Dust still clung to his boots. A rifle leaned against the wall beside him like it was part of his spine. He didn't blink when she started to dance. Clara moved like she meant it, but not for the usual reasons. Her body remembered the steps, the teasing twirls, the slow lean forward that made every man think tonight might be different. But her mind was on the stranger, the man who watched without watching, like he was waiting for something, like he already knew her. Her heart thudded harder than it should have. She tried to pin it on the music, on the whiskey fumes and sweat-soaked floorboards, but the heat rising under her skin wasn't from the lanterns. He didn't clap when she finished. He just walked past the stage, slow, measured, like a man visiting a grave. Dropped a silver dollar onto the wood floor with a red poker chip beneath it. It hit with a dull click and spun once before settling flat. Clara stared down at it. Something about the red chip made her feel like she'd been marked. She bent to pick it up. When she looked back up, the man was gone. No name, no smile, no clue. Just silence. And yet something in her gut shifted, like the wind before a thunderstorm. She knew two things for certain. He wasn't here by accident, and he didn't come to see her dance. The silver dollar with the red poker chip felt heavier in her hand than it had any right to. Clara turned it over, thumb brushing the worn coin, then tapping the chip. Red as blood. Just like her dress. Just like the past she'd done her best to bury. She hadn't seen a man leave the saloon that quietly since the night Brant Kinley shot a card cheat through the throat. That man had bled across the floor. This one had left only questions. Clara didn't like questions. She tucked the coin and chip into her corset, closer than her own breath, and went backstage without a word. Behind her, the saloon roared back to life like nothing had shifted, but she felt it, like a draft in a locked room. In the mirror, she wiped the sweat off her brow and stared at her reflection. Still the same face. Rouge on her lips, lashes painted thick, curls pinned too tight. But her eyes, they were unsettled. He hadn't clapped. That shouldn't have bothered her, but it did. "Got you rattled, did he?" Clara didn't turn. The voice belonged to Miriam, the piano player's wife and part-time seamstress. She stood by the dressing room door, holding a spool of thread and her usual half-smirk. "The tall one by the wall?" Clara asked. Miriam nodded. "Didn't drink, didn't blink, just watched, like he was looking through you." Clara said nothing. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her skin was cold now, despite the heat of the oil lamps. "Name's Wes Calder," Miriam added. Asked Pike out front what town this was, like he just rode in blind. Clara flinched. "Calder?" "Yeah, why?" Clara stood. Her knees weren't as steady as she wanted them to be. She forced herself to walk past Miriam, out the back hallway, through the swinging kitchen doors, and out into the alley where the cold night slapped her in the face. The desert sky was clear, moon like a slit eye watching everything. And down the street, just past the edge of the lamplight, she saw a figure, leaning against the hitching post outside the livery, hat low, coat heavy with dust and miles. He hadn't gone far. She stepped out, but he didn't move, didn't acknowledge her, just stood still, like the desert wind had carved him from stone. "What do you want from me?" she asked, voice low. The man didn't answer right away, but when he finally looked at her, his eyes pinned her in place like barbed wire. "I want the truth," he said. "About what?" "About what happened to my brother." The air went still. Clara's mouth opened, but no words came. She stepped back like she'd been struck. The coin in her corset burned like iron fresh from the forge, and in that second, everything she'd been running from found her again. This man hadn't come for a dance. He'd come to dig up a grave. The saloon was louder than usual. Laughter sharpened at the edges, clinking glasses punched the air like warning bells, and the smoke seemed thicker, like it wanted to hide something. Clara moved through it all like a ghost in silk. Her dress from earlier was traded for a shawl and plain skirt, but her presence still caught eyes. She didn't stop for anyone, not even Silas Pike, the barkeep, who called out, "He back yet?" She ignored him. She wasn't looking for Wes Calder. She was looking for the man who owned her silence. Sheriff Brant Kinley was upstairs, up the narrow, creaking staircase in the private room behind the red curtain, where no music played and no mirrors hung. Just Brant's boots on his desk, his iron badge gleaming like a brand fresh from the fire. When Clara entered, he didn't even look up from his cigar, just blew a stream of smoke toward the oil lamp, letting it twist and curl like a lazy snake. "You took your time," he said. Clara closed the door behind her and locked it. "Wes Calder," she said flatly. That got his eyes. Brant lowered the cigar and leaned forward, boots dropping to the floor with a dull thud. "You sure?" He asked about his brother. Brant's face didn't change, but the temperature in the room sure did. "Did you say anything?" Clara laughed once, cold. "You think I'm that stupid?" Brant stood. He wasn't tall, but he filled the space like a wall that knew how to hit back. His voice came low, taut. "You let him stay?" "I don't own the rooms, Brant. You do." He moved close. Too close. She could smell whiskey and sweat under his cologne. "You know what happens if he starts digging, Clara?" She met his gaze. Her eyes didn't flinch. "He's already digging." He grabbed her wrist fast. Not hard, but firm, like a warning. "You think you can survive it a second time? You think anyone will believe a whore with a guilty face and no name to speak of?" Her other hand moved fast. Slap. The sound cracked across the room like a pistol. Brant staggered back half a step, more surprised than hurt. He smiled, wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth with his thumb. "That mouth of yours is going to get you buried." Clara stepped back, breath trembling. "Then dig the damn hole." They stared at each other for one long second, her chest heaving, his fists clenched, before Brant turned and poured 2 drinks like nothing had happened. "You want a future in this town," he said, setting a glass down. "You'll find a way to shut that cowboy up." Clara didn't drink it. She turned and walked out, pulse thudding like hooves across dry earth. Downstairs, the piano picked up a jaunty tune, and the laughter rose again. But Clara's hands were shaking, because the sheriff just drew a line, and Wes Calder had already stepped over it. Wes Calder stood alone on the ridge overlooking Mercy Hill, the wind tugging at his coat like a preacher trying to turn him back. The hills were quiet now, too quiet. Not a bird, not a cricket. Just the sound of his boots grinding over gravel as he knelt by a crooked mesquite bush and dug his hands into the earth. The soil was dry, hard, but Wes didn't hesitate. He knew right where to dig. Minutes passed before the blade of his knife scraped something metal, a rusted tin box sealed tight with dried mud and time. He sat back on his heels, breath steady, his gloves off, hands bare for what came next. Inside, a folded military discharge paper yellowed from age, a tarnished wedding ring wrapped in cloth, and a single photograph, the edges curled, the ink faded. 3 men stood in uniform. 2 smiled. 1 didn't. Wes stared at the unsmiling one the longest. His brother, Emmett Calder, dead 5 years, shot in the back during a cattle raid gone wrong. At least, that's what the papers said. That's what they told the family. But Wes never bought the story. Emmett had been a cautious man, loyal, hard to fool, harder to kill, the kind of man who wouldn't die easy unless someone had helped it happen. And now Wes had a name. Brant Kinley. He remembered the letter. 1 sentence burned into the back of his skull like a brand. He knew the truth and paid for it. Truth about what? Wes pressed the ring into his palm and closed his fist. He didn't ride into this town for whiskey, or women, or even justice. He came for blood. And yet, Clara, the girl in red, the one whose stage smile had faltered when she saw him, the one who froze when he said Emmett's name. She knew something, maybe everything. She moved like someone living on borrowed time. Like every step she took was 1 heartbeat from collapse. Wes couldn't ignore what he'd seen in her eyes, fear and guilt. He stood, tucked the box under a flat rock, and mounted his horse. The ride back into town was slow, calculated, each hoofbeat syncing with his thoughts. Clara had danced like she was trying to forget a sin. But Wes wasn't about to let the past stay buried. Not when the man wearing a badge had blood on his hands. And not when the only woman who might have answers was hiding behind rouge and rhythm. He'd dig it all up. Truth, lies, shame, and whatever was buried under Clara Avery's painted smile. The town of Mercy Hill didn't know it yet, but its reckoning had already arrived. Clara lit the lantern herself that night, even though Silas usually handled it. The flame caught on the first strike, casting warm amber across the empty saloon. The tables were cleaned, the chairs turned, the piano silent. But she wasn't ready to go upstairs. Not yet. She sat at the bar with a bottle of rye and 2 glasses. One stayed full, the other didn't. The bat-wing doors creaked just before midnight. She didn't turn. "Bar's closed," she said. Bootsteps answered. Then silence beside her. She slid the full glass toward him without looking. "Figured you'd come back." "I did." She took another sip. "You always this quiet?" "Only when I'm listening." She finally looked at him. His coat was still dusty, hat still low, but tonight she could see the cut of his jaw clearer, the shadow of something beneath that hard exterior. Regret, maybe. Rage. Maybe both. "What are you listening for?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and set something between them. A folded photograph. Clara froze. It was faded, but she knew it. Knew it like she knew her own heartbeat. The picture of Emmett. Wes's brother. Her. She pushed the glass away. Stood. "Why show me this?" "Because I think you know why he died." "You think wrong." He stood too. Close now. Too close. She could smell the sweat and saddle on him, could see the way his chest moved when he breathed. Slow, controlled, like a man taming something wild inside him. Clara's voice broke. "You think I don't carry it? That it don't claw at me every night like it's got teeth?" He didn't touch her, didn't even reach, but his words cut. "I think you carry it real well, for someone who's still lying." She slapped him. This time her hand left a mark, But Wes didn't flinch. He just stared down at her, jaw tight, eyes dark. She stepped back, her breath hitched, eyes burning. "You don't get to come in here, drag ghosts out of the dirt, and judge how I bleed." He took a step forward. She didn't move. "I'm not judging," he said, voice low. "I'm figuring out if the woman I saw dancing that night is still in there, or if she buried herself with Emmett too." The words hit like a bullet. And just like that, the silence turned dangerous, hot, charged. She wanted him to kiss her. She hated how much. He looked at her like he might, then didn't. Wes turned, walked away, left the photo behind. As the doors creaked shut behind him, Clara picked it up with trembling fingers. She didn't cry, but the flame in the lantern flickered, like it couldn't decide whether to stay or die. And in the mirror behind the bar, Clara didn't see a saloon girl anymore. She saw a woman running out of places to hide. Clara's fingers trembled as she laced up her corset behind the red curtain. The photograph Wes left on the bar now lay tucked in her drawer upstairs, face down, as if it could see her. Judge her. She should have burned it. But she couldn't. She tugged the laces tight until her ribs ached. Maybe pain could push everything else out. Downstairs, the saloon was waking up. Chairs clattering, the piano warming up with off-key chords. Miriam's laughter slicing through the smoke like a knife that didn't care who it cut. Clara took one last breath and slid on the dress. Blood red, same as always. But before she buttoned the front, she reached beneath the hem of her undergarments and pulled out a thin gold ring strung on a piece of rawhide. She slipped it on her finger. Not the flashy, eye-catching kind of ring a girl wore to make a man think she was taken. This one was thin, worn, quiet. It had been Emmett's. She only wore it when she needed strength or punishment. Some nights it was hard to tell which was which. The ring sat heavy on her finger as she stepped into the saloon. It was still early, no customers yet. Just Silas mopping near the front, muttering about spilled beer and broken dreams. On the bar sat something new, a small envelope. No stamp, no wax. Just her name, handwritten in ink she hadn't seen in years. Mabel Calder, her real name, the one no one in Mercy Hill knew. Her stomach dropped, the kind of drop you don't come back from. She looked around. No one was watching. She snatched the envelope and darted back up the stairs, heart in her throat. The letter was sealed with a single fold. Inside, just 5 words. "He's not done digging, Mabel. That's all. No signature, no threat. Just a reminder." She burned it in the oil lamp's flame, watched the paper curl and blacken, ashes falling like confessions. Downstairs, the door creaked. Wes. Clara didn't go down. She watched him from the top of the stairs. He walked in slow, scanned the room, then took the corner table facing both exits. The man didn't just want the truth. He was hunting it. And someone else was watching her. Maybe the same one who knew her real name. Someone close enough to touch. She looked down at the ring on her finger. The lie she wore like armor. It wasn't just Emmett's. It was hers. Because once upon a time, in a church no one talks about anymore. She hadn't danced in red. She'd walked in white. And the man waiting below? He didn't know he was sitting across from his own widow. The knock came at her door just past midnight. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more. Clara froze halfway through brushing her hair, heart crawling up her throat. That knock didn't belong to a drunk or a customer. It belonged to Sheriff Brant Kinley. She opened the door just wide enough to show her eyes. Brant pushed it open the rest of the way without asking. He stepped inside, boots thudding like verdicts on the old wood floor. He smelled of cigar smoke and saddle oil. His leather coat was unbuttoned, hand resting dangerously close to the iron on his belt. "You seen Calder tonight?" he asked, flat as a dead prairie. Clara blinked. "He was in earlier." Brant scanned the room, her hairbrush, the open window, the still-burning lamp. "He leave?" She nodded. Brant shut the door behind him. Click. That sound made her stomach tighten. "You're sure he don't know?" he asked, stepping closer. Clara held her ground. "About what?" "You know damn well what." He was too close now. She could feel the heat rolling off him. Not warm like Wes. No. This was the heat of something ready to scorch. Brant leaned in, voice like a knife sliding under skin. "He finds out what really happened to Emmett Calder. It won't be just your secrets in the ground, Clara." She crossed her arms, fingers digging into her ribs. "You mean the part where you had him shot in the back?" He smiled. God help her, he smiled. "I didn't pull the trigger," Brant said, "but I did write the order." He sat on the edge of her bed, too casual, like they were old lovers or old enemies. Emmett was sniffing where he shouldn't have. "You remember how scared you were back then? How you came to me, shaking, crying?" Clara said nothing. He stood again, walked over to her dresser, picked up the old photo Wes left behind. "You ever tell him the truth?" Brant asked. "No." "Good." He slid the photo back into place, neat and tidy. "Let it rot." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing." Clara didn't answer. Brant opened the door just a crack and muttered over his shoulder, "Next time Calder comes around, you kiss him, you touch him, you so much as look at him like you used to look at Emmett." He turned slowly. "I'll bury them both." Then he was gone. Just like that. But Clara didn't breathe again for a full minute. When she finally did, it came out ragged. She shut the door, locked it twice, then slid to the floor, trembling. She had kissed Emmett once, the night before the bullet found him. She never got to say goodbye. And now Brant had drawn a line, not just in the dust, in blood, and she had 1 foot over it already. The night air reeked of smoke and scorched pine. From her window on the second floor of the Gilded Spur, Clara could see the orange flicker in the distance, wild and growing, flames lashing at the sky like they were after God himself. The Kinley barn was burning. She didn't hesitate, boots on, shawl thrown. She was down the stairs and out the back before Silas could stop her. The fire pulled half the town like moths. But Clara didn't run toward the flames. She ran around them, toward the shadows, toward the real danger. She found him behind the general store. Elias Kinley, younger brother of Brant, and meaner in all the ways that mattered. He reeked of kerosene and liquor, his hands blackened with soot, his eyes wide, manic. "What did you do, Elias?" He turned to her, unbothered. Grinning, shirt half-buttoned. "Lit a little truth, sweetheart. Kinley name's gonna shine brighter now. That was your family's land." "Yeah," he snorted, "and Brant was selling it off to the railroad under the table. Needed a reason to cash the insurance first. Now he's got one." Clara's breath caught. "You torched your own barn?" "I did the dirty work," he said, stepping closer. But Brant gave the nod. She could smell the lies on his breath, but she also saw the flicker of something real in his eyes. Pride. Mad, reckless pride. He looked her over, slow and cruel. "Don't look so shocked. You've been wearing the sheriff's stink for years. Now you know what it costs to keep that badge shining." Clara tried to back away, but he caught her wrist. "Let go." "You always thought you were better than this place," he said, voice turning. "But you ain't. You're ours." She slapped him, hard, and he laughed. "You think Wes Calder's gonna save you?" Elias hissed. That man's got a death wish and a loaded gun. Brant'll bury him without blinking. And if you stand next to him, he leaned in close, whispered hot against her cheek, you'll burn too. That's when Clara did it. Kneed him hard, where it counted. Elias collapsed to the dirt, coughing and cursing. She ran, didn't look back. By the time she reached the barn, the fire was nearly out. Brant stood with a wet kerchief over his face, barking orders like a man trying to control a storm he helped start. Wes was there too, arms folded, eyes burning brighter than the embers. He watched Brant like a hunter watches a wounded bear. Clara stepped beside him, breathless. He looked at her, saw the dirt on her dress, the bruise starting on her wrist. What happened? She didn't answer, just stared into the ash, eyes wide with the kind of fear that's learned, not felt. Because it wasn't just the barn that was burning. It was the truth. And Elias Kinley had just lit the first match. The next morning, Mercy Hill was still licking its wounds. The barn smoldered. Smoke drifted like a ghost that refused to leave, curling through alleys, into coffee pots, onto shoulders like an omen. Wes sat outside the livery, sharpening his knife on a whetstone that had already seen too much steel. His eyes didn't move from the saloon across the street. Not once. He wasn't waiting for a show. He was waiting for the lie to blink. Clara, if that was her name, had disappeared after the fire. No one saw her return to the saloon. No one saw her leave. But Wes knew damn well she was inside. He'd seen the bruise on her wrist, the look in her eye, and the truth trying to crawl out from behind her lips. He wasn't a patient man, not anymore. He stood, crossed the street, and walked straight through the bat-wing doors. Silas, wiping glasses at the bar, glanced up. She ain't taking company. She'll take mine. Wes didn't wait for permission. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time and knocked hard on her door. Silence. Then footsteps. The door cracked open. Her eyes met his, dark, sleepless, but sharp. Don't, she said, voice low. I ain't here to hurt you. No, she said, but you'll finish what someone else started. He pushed inside gently, and she didn't fight him. The room was dim, the curtains drawn. On the table sat the burned corner of a letter. Only the loop of a letter M remained. He stared at it. You gonna tell me who Mabel Calder is? Clara didn't move, didn't blink. Then, slowly, she walked to the corner drawer, opened it, pulled out a folded paper and handed it to him. Wes opened it with calloused fingers. A marriage certificate. Emmett Calder and Mabel Ruth Avery. He didn't speak, didn't have to. The world tilted. His brother's wife. Clara stood by the window now, eyes on the street. I took his name, she said quietly, and then I buried it. Why? She turned. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. Because I watched him die, Wes, and I couldn't stop it. You were there? His voice cracked like dry wood. She nodded. He knew something. Something Brant didn't want known. There was no robbery that night, no ambush. Just Brant, and a deal gone wrong. Wes sat down hard on the edge of the bed. Why didn't you tell me? She crossed the room, kneeled in front of him. Because if I did, you'd die chasing the truth, just like he did. Her hand found his. He didn't pull away. Tears welled up, but didn't fall. Their faces were inches apart. And still, they didn't kiss. But the moment between them, it burned hotter than the barn, because now they weren't just bound by want, they were bound by a name, and a grave neither of them could walk away from. The sound woke him before the pain, a frantic, high-pitched whinny, like a scream torn open at the belly. Wes was on his feet before his boots were laced, pistol drawn, shirt half-buttoned. The noise came again, sharper now, ragged. desperate. He sprinted down the stairs of the livery house and into the moonlight. And there she was. Dusty, his mare, lay on her side near the hitch post, her flank slashed open from shoulder to hip. Blood soaked the dirt beneath her like spilled ink. The blade had cut clean but deep, intentional, his breath caught. Not in fear, in rage, she flailed once, legs kicking, then stilled. Not dead, but close. Wes dropped to his knees beside her, cradling her head in one arm, pressing his hand to the wound with the other. Blood pulsed around his fingers. "Hold on, girl," he whispered. "You ain't going like this. Not like this." Behind him, footsteps. Light ones. Clara. She knelt beside him, shawl half off, eyes wide and filling fast. "Oh God," she breathed. "He was sending a message," Wes growled. "Same one he sent Emmett." Clara touched Dusty's neck, whispering something soft only the mare could hear. Wes caught a glimpse of the girl beneath the rouge then, the preacher's daughter who once stitched saddle blankets, not the saloon girl who danced through fire. He didn't look at Clara. He looked at the boot prints near the post. Big, worn. He recognized the heel drag. Elias Kinley. He stood slow, blood still on his hand, jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. "You're going after him," Clara said. He didn't answer, because there was no after. There was only now. He found Elias in the back of the smokehouse behind the saloon, drunk, shirtless, knife still wet. The first punch shattered his nose. The second cracked 2 ribs. Elias went down hard, wheezing like a kicked dog. "You touch what's mine again," Wes said, voice low and shaking. "I'll break every part of you Brant don't care about." Elias spit blood and laughed. "A whore and a horse. You always did aim low, Calder." Wes didn't respond. He just pressed the heel of his boot into Elias's broken ribs until the laughter stopped, then walked away. Back in the stable, Dusty was still breathing. Barely. Clara had stitched the wound best she could, blood up to her elbows. "You'll need a vet," she said, wiping her brow. "There ain't one." Clara looked at him, then down at the mare. "Then you pray." Wes didn't know how, but he stayed with her anyway. Sat in the dirt beside Dusty, his hand on her mane, his jaw still tight. And for the first time since Mercy Hill, Clara leaned against him, shoulder to shoulder. Not because he needed comfort, because she did. And in that silence, surrounded by blood and moonlight, one thing became painfully clear. This town didn't just want Wes gone. It wanted to tear out everything he loved, piece by piece, and it had just taken its first bite. They rode out before sunrise. No words, no glances, just Wes's saddle creaking and Clara's shawl snapping in the wind. The land outside Mercy Hill was still, wrapped in frost and silence, like even the birds were holding their breath. Wes led the way, his mare wrapped and limping behind them in a makeshift cart, barely breathing. Dusty needed time. Clara needed something else entirely. They reached the sycamore tree just as the sun cracked over the hills. It stood alone on a slope of pale grass, crooked and leafless, its bark peeling like skin after fire. She dismounted slow. Her hands shook even though the cold hadn't reached her yet. Wes stayed back, letting her walk alone. She knelt at the base of the tree, brushed away the fallen leaves, and there it was, a small wooden cross, half buried in the dirt. No name. Just a single carving at the center, deep and ragged. E. She stared at it, long and hollow. "I was 5 months gone when Emmett died," she said, her voice breaking the silence like a bottle against stone. Wes didn't move. Clara swallowed hard. "I ran, like a coward, hid in the hills, ended up near the border. No doctor. Just a woman who took pity and gave me rags and whiskey. Her hands clenched into fists. He came too early. He was small. Didn't cry once. I held him all night. Wes walked slowly toward her, boots crunching dry grass. I named him Eli, she whispered, for his father, for the boy who never had a chance to be one. Tears spilled down her cheeks then, quiet, hot, the kind that left burns no one could see. I buried him here, alone. Then I became Clara Avery, the saloon girl, the liar, the coward. She stood, shaking. And you still want to know why I never told you? Wes said nothing. He just reached out and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in like she might disappear. She buried her face into his chest. Let herself be held. For once. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But there, under a ghost tree and above a forgotten grave, something deeper passed between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But understanding. He placed a calloused hand on the cross. I would have loved him, he said. Clara's breath caught. I know, she whispered, and for the first time since Mercy Hill tried to break them both. Neither of them turned away. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about a boy with no name carved in stone, and a woman trying to remember who she used to be before the world lit the match. Friday night brought every bastard with a coin and a secret into the back room of the Gilded Spur. Cigars burned low, whiskey spilled thick, and the men with clean hands made the dirtiest trades. Quiet as confession, bold as sin. Sheriff Brant Kinley sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. 5 landowners flanked him. Rich men with brittle smiles and eyes that hadn't known fear in years. Cards flicked from Brant's hands. Smooth, practiced, rigged. He didn't play to gamble. He played to own. Wes watched from the shadows of the upstairs balcony, arms folded, jaw tight. His eyes weren't on the cards. They were on the ledger book sitting beside Brant's holster. A thin black book with a broken spine and names written in blood-thick ink. Clara stood behind the bar below, mixing drinks, wearing red again. Tonight, less armor, more warning. Her eyes met Wes's for a second. A flicker. Then she turned away. The hand was dealt. Brant smirked. 4 of a kind, he said, spreading cards like a preacher laying down scripture. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. The others grumbled. One slammed his drink, another spat. But none dared accuse. You'll have your water rights, Brant added casually, picking up the ledger. And the railroad gets its shortcut. Everyone wins. Except the town. Except the ranchers losing land they couldn't afford to fight for. Except the truth. Wes stepped down from the balcony, slow and deliberate. The room quieted like a saloon after a gunshot. Brant's eyes snapped to him. You weren't invited, the sheriff said. Didn't come for cards. Wes stopped at the table, took the ledger in his hands, thumbed through the pages. Inside were names, land plots, dollar signs, initials beside each line. WKCABK. The last one had a date circled 3 times. Emmett Calder. Wes closed the book. Clara stood frozen behind the bar. Her breath held so long it hurt. Brant rose, slow and careful. You want to accuse me of something, Calder? No, Wes said, voice dry as gravel. I want to warn you. A beat of silence. I've seen enough men hide behind cards, Wes added, holding up the ledger. You're about to run out of aces. Brant smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You planning on being a problem? Wes leaned close, voice low. I am the problem. He dropped the ledger on the table with a loud thump. See you Sunday, Sheriff, out at the ridge. Brant didn't blink, but everyone else in that room felt it. The shift in the air, the countdown, the line drawn. Wes turned and walked out, boots loud on the hardwood. Clara gripped the edge of the bar. because now the poker game was done, and the next hand would be drawn with iron. It was supposed to be just another Saturday night at the Spur. The saloon buzzed, thick with cigar smoke and the roar of men losing more than they could afford. Whiskey spilled, cards flew, the piano slammed its usual tired tune. But beneath it all, the tension hummed like a string pulled too tight. Clara wore red again, the same dress she always danced in, low cut, slit high, made to turn heads and steal breath. But tonight it wasn't armor, it wasn't performance, it was bait. She stepped onto the stage, one hand at her side, the other brushing her skirt. Eyes turned, laughter hushed. The piano picked up slow, but she didn't move. Not yet, because she saw him, Elias Kinley, standing too close to the front of the stage, bottle in one hand, knife sheathed at his hip. He didn't come for the show. He came for her. Her pulse thudded like a gallop. Wes was in the back corner, hat low, drink untouched, jaw locked like he already knew how this night would end. Then Clara danced. Slow at first, graceful, but sharp. Every move deliberate, her eyes fixed not on Elias, but on Wes. Her message was clear. Not afraid. Not anymore. But Elias didn't like being ignored. Halfway through the second turn, he lunged, fast, sloppy, mean. His hand caught the edge of her skirt and pulled hard. Clara stumbled. Gasps cracked through the crowd. The piano slammed silent. "Let go!" she shouted, struggling. But Elias had already drawn the knife. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her backward. The blade flashed. That's when Wes moved. He crossed the floor like a storm, hand already on his revolver. Clara screamed. The shot cracked like thunder. Elias buckled. Not from the bullet, but from the blade. Clara had stabbed him. Her hands shook around the handle, buried deep in Elias's gut. He staggered, mouth open in shock, blood blooming across her dress in hot, dark blotches. He collapsed at her feet. Silence, then panic. Chairs scraped, boots scrambled, a bottle shattered. Brant Kinley shoved through the doors. One look at the scene and his hand went straight to his gun. But Wes already had his drawn, the two locked eyes, like wolves across a carcass. No law was broken, Wes said flatly, only blood drawn where it deserved to be. Clara stood between them, hands stained, chest heaving, face unreadable. Brant's jaw clenched, but he didn't fire. Not tonight. He holstered his weapon. "This ain't over." He turned and left. Wes rushed to Clara's side. She didn't cry, didn't collapse, just stared down at her dress. Red turned rust, a color she'd worn too many nights, but never like this. She whispered, "It's never coming out, is it?" Wes wrapped his arm around her. "No," he said, "but neither are we." They rode at dawn. No music, no crowds, just hooves hitting frostbit dirt, the sky turning copper behind them. Mercy Hill Ridge lay to the west, flat land scarred by cattle tracks, mesquite, and buried sins. The kind of place where wind talked to bones and ghosts walked without shame. Clara rode behind Wes, saddle creaking beneath her. She hadn't said a word since the night before. Not after the blood. Not after the body. Not after Brant Kinley's stare promised bullets. They reached the ridge by mid-morning. Wes dismounted first, stood quiet with his hands on his belt, scanning the horizon like it might answer for what happened. Clara followed, her boots crunching dry grass. The place looked the same, but it felt different. This was where Emmett had died. Wes knew it. She'd never told him. But he knew. The silence between them broke when Clara walked to the base of the ridge and knelt. She brushed aside the loose dirt and uncovered a rusted shell casing. Wes's breath hitched, just barely. "That where it happened?" he asked. She nodded. "They said he was ambushed," Wes said. "Said he died protecting cattle." Clara stood, brushing her skirt. That's what Brant told me too, until the truth bled through. She turned to Wes, eyes sharp, raw. Emmett found out Brant was using the railroad to seize ranch lands, forging signatures, murdering holdouts. He had proof, a ledger, a letter. You saw it? I helped him write it. That caught Wes, she continued, her voice cracking now. He told me he'd turn it in, ride to the federal marshal and burn Brant with it. But he never made it. No, she said, because I told Brant. The wind stopped. Or maybe it just felt that way. Wes blinked. I was scared, Wes. Emmett was talking about leaving, about turning in everything, about putting us in danger. I thought if Brant knew, he could protect us, make it go away. Her lip trembled. I didn't know he'd kill him. Wes stepped back. One step. Just one. But it felt like a mile. I didn't know, she shouted, the words clawing out. I thought I was saving him. She dropped to her knees in the dirt, sobbing. But I killed him. I killed your brother. Wes stood frozen, his gun belt heavy, his chest heaving like he'd taken a gut punch straight from the hand of God. Clara looked up through tears. Say it. Say what you want. Say I'm no better than Brant. But he didn't. He just walked to her, slowly, knees buckling as he dropped down beside her. I don't forgive you, he said. Her face crumpled. But I don't hate you either. Then softer, quieter, like he barely believed it himself. Maybe that's worse. And there, on the ridge where Emmett Calder bled out into the dust, Wes and Clara finally faced the truth. Not all betrayals come from hate. Some are born from love. And love, when it breaks, cuts deeper than any bullet. The sheriff stood alone at the edge of town. Hat low, rifle slung, eyes sharp. Brant Kinley wasn't a man who waited. He calculated, positioned, controlled. But today he waited. Because he knew they were coming. He'd heard about Elias, about Clara's bloodstained dress, about the ledger Wes carried like a noose around his neck. And now, it was Sunday. Just like Wes promised. Clara rode in beside Wes, not a step behind. She wore black now, mourning not just a man, but the pieces of herself she'd never get back. The townsfolk watched from porches, behind curtains, through rifle barrels. They knew what kind of Sunday this was. Wes dismounted slow, hand on his revolver, boots cracking the silence like distant thunder. Brant, he said, voice dry as bone. You got one last chance to walk away. The sheriff spit, cool and clean. And you got one last lie left in you, Calder. Make it good. Wes didn't answer. He just drew. Brant was faster, but not by enough. The first shot clipped Wes's side, spun him. But his return caught Brant in the thigh, dropping him to one knee. Clara screamed. Townsfolk ducked. Wes advanced, bleeding, eyes locked on the man who'd stolen everything. Emmett begged, he growled. You remember that? Brant laughed through the pain. He didn't beg. He trusted me. Then he fired again, missing wide. Wes stepped in close. Then he died a fool, Wes said, and leveled his revolver. Brant looked up, bloody, broken, still smirking. You shoot me, he rasped, and you ain't no better than me. Wes hesitated, just for a second. That's when Clara stepped forward, gun drawn. Her hand didn't shake. You took my husband, my child, my soul. Brant looked up at her. You gonna kill me with that hand? The same one that turned me into God? Her lip curled. Then she lowered the gun. No, she whispered. You don't get to die clean. She turned, walked away. Wes stared after her, then holstered his weapon. Leave Mercy Hill, he told Brant. If I see your shadow after sundown, I bury it. Brant didn't argue. Couldn't. Because the town saw him now. saw the limp, the blood, the fear, the truth, and that was a death worse than any bullet. That night, Wes sat on the Spurs' back porch, shirt bloodied, ribs wrapped. Clara joined him. They said nothing for a long time. Then she spoke. "He'll come back." Wes shook his head. "No, he won't." "How can you be sure?" He looked at her, weary but sure. "Because shame's the one wound that don't heal." They sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the stars bleed across the sky. The war was over, but nothing was peaceful. Not yet. A week passed. Then two. Brant Kinley vanished from Mercy Hill like a ghost, ashamed of his own shadow. No one spoke his name anymore. The town turned its eyes to the horizon, like they were all afraid he might ride back in. Remade, more cruel. But he didn't. The ledger Wes held, gone now, burned page by page behind the gilded spur. Not because justice didn't matter, but because what mattered more was survival. Too many names in that book would have meant too many shallow graves, and they'd both had enough of those. Clara cleaned the upstairs room out herself, tossed every red dress, every feather, every false smile stitched into corsets and worn-down routines. She didn't speak much for a while, but one morning Wes found her on the back porch again, wearing simple cotton, hair tied up, eyes fixed on nothing. He brought her coffee. She didn't smile, just took the cup, hands brushed. She broke the silence with a question that didn't need an answer. "You think folks like us ever stop bleeding?" Wes thought about it, long and hard. "No," he finally said, "but you learn to breathe through it." That made her laugh. Just once. Just enough. Later that day, they saddled up and rode out to the ridge, not to mourn, but to plant something. Wes brought a spade. Clara brought a sapling. Willow. Soft and young. A tree meant to bend, not break. They dug side by side where the wind once howled, and the earth still remembered Emmett Calder's blood. Clara pressed the roots into the dirt like it was sacred. Because it was. Then she looked at Wes. "I never asked," she said. "Why you stayed?" He shrugged. "Never learned how to run." But that wasn't the truth, and she knew it. "You ever gonna kiss me, Wes Calder?" He looked up from the dirt, squinted, smirked. "Eventually." She nodded. "Don't wait too long. Dust settles slow, but it always settles." He reached out, brushed the dirt from her cheek, let his thumb rest there a second longer than it should have. They didn't kiss, not yet, because what they had wasn't rushed. It wasn't pretty. It was built from fire, forged in regret. But it was real, and in Mercy Hill, real things were rare. That night, they sat on the porch again. 2 chairs, 1 silence, and for the first time in years, Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to. The stars blinked awake overhead, and Wes whispered something only the dark heard. "I ain't ever gonna leave." Not her, not this broken town, because the Saloon girl's last dance hadn't been a farewell. It was the first step toward something honest. And out here, that was the rarest miracle of all. If this story gripped you deep and left a mark, don't just ride off into the sunset. Tap that like button and subscribe to Saddlehorn Stories for more gritty Western tales packed with love, betrayal, and the kind of truth that only dust and blood can reveal. Which part of the Saloon girl's last dance hit you the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're listening.